Hi guys, Matt Lemke here with Mark Seifter from Paizo, and we're going to talk today about a little bit about Starfinder and a lot more about Pathfinder, specifically the Barbarian that they blogged about on Monday. We are at Origins Game Fair, so get down to Columbus. You probably won't see this until after that, but anyway, get down to Columbus anyway. So Mark, how did Starfinder influence Pathfinder 2nd Edition?
Well, it's funny that you should ask that because a lot of people have actually sometimes asked me, how did Starfinder influence Pathfinder 2nd Edition? I mean, it's the game we published 1 year before the Pathfinder playtest. But actually, we've been working on Pathfinder 2nd Edition for longer. We've been working on it for so many years that Pathfinder 2nd Edition influenced Starfinder. And I mean, I know that might seem like, well, but wait, Starfinder is kind of closer to Pathfinder 1st Edition. It isn't as far away, and that's because that was the design mandate for Starfinder. But we actually took some of the ideas we had already reached in Pathfinder 2nd Edition and actually brought them over to Starfinder. A big way, and something we haven't previewed yet, so all you Starfinder fans, this sort of is a preview for this. The hazard system of traps and haunts and environmental hazard and those sorts of things.
Haunts.
Yeah, all of those sorts of hazards that you might encounter. We literally, during the Starfinder design process, it's like I was assigned, like Owen was assigned different chapters. Like, we don't have anything yet for traps. I was like, take a look at this thing that Logan and I have been working on for early stages for hazards in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and Owen's like, that is really good. And I was like, I'm just gonna kind of take it and change the language to Starfinder and make new examples that have some techno combinations, like the fan favorite trash compactor trap and the.
Wonder why that's a fan favorite.
I don't know, that people like it, or the trap your soul in a digital archive trap. And so I made some new example traps, but basically used what was at the time the state of the art hazard system from 2nd Edition. We have since developed it further, so it's not exactly the same, but you're going to see a lot of DNA, and you might think, oh yeah, Starfinder definitely influenced this, but it was actually the other way around.
So when will those hazards be coming out?
So those hazards are going to be in the playtest, although only a few sample hazards made it into the playtest book for space. A lot of them are actually going to be in sort of the monster doc PDF that comes out for free on August 2nd with the Pathfinder playtest.
Okay.
So,
okay. My bad.
So when you guys see that, and there hasn't been a blog yet for hazards, so when you see the hazards blog, all you guys who watch this will know, oh yeah, right, yeah, it's kind of like Starfinder. You can check your Starfinder book. That's in a big way something that was very strongly similar.
Somebody's trying to talk to me on my phone.
Oh, okay.
We can ignore that.
Fair enough. Let's ignore other people right now. We're not ignoring you guys, though. So, let's see. There's that. Another interesting thing that sort of came from it is that Starfinder's ability score system is sort of an early prototype for Pathfinder 2nd Edition's way of handling ability scores. And we ultimately did wind up using almost exactly the same level up system for ability scores. You guys have seen that by now if you've been reading the blogs. But there were some sort of hitches to the initial assignment of the ability scores in Starfinder, and actually you guys told us this too. We saw it as well. Like, it's hard to assign points to a Solarian in the initial system based on the way that it works. Mainly because Starfinder actually initially was using a different ability score system and actually later changed to our prototype Pathfinder 2nd Edition system after we had come up with stuff for the Solarian. But the new system in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, you guys have seen that by now too in the blogs. It's that you actually assign boosts based on your background, which is similar to assigning them based on the theme. You assign them based on your ancestry, that's similar to assigning them based on the race. But then also you get some more based on your class and some other ones that are similar to the level up, where you get 4 that you just pick what they are. And so because you get more points in backgrounds than you did before, and you get more points in ancestries than you did before, that sort of path of your character's life from, you're born with an ancestry, you get a background, like you grow up, you're a smith's apprentice, you become a fighter, you train as a fighter, and you get fighter stats, and then those 4 stats for leveling up to first level from, I guess, 0th level, which you never played. That just does your stats now. There isn't a separate point buy step. And because of that, we can give you what would turn out to be in Starfinder a mother load of point buy. Like, in Starfinder, you get 10, right? And then you add in your ancestries and your themes. When your ancestries add a total of 2, I guess, in Starfinder, your theme adds 1. So you're sort of 13 points. In Pathfinder 2nd Edition, you could very well build a character that has an 18, a 16, a 14, a 12, a 10, and an 8, which is essentially would be 18 points. Now, if we just gave you that in Starfinder, that would be a problem because it's free from point buy, and you would have 2 18s, maybe, and a 12. But because of the way it's distributed among different sections, it sort of fluidly gives you the ability to not have them all as 18s, assign them based on your character. And for new players, I don't know about you guys, but when I learn a new system that doesn't have the 6 ability scores common to Pathfinder and Starfinder and D&D, one of the first things that's tricky for me is figuring out, like, what's the value of these different ability scores? What's, like, for a new player, it could be intimidating. But with the system where it's like, oh yeah, you're a blacksmith, that's cool, take this stuff. You're a fighter, here's what you need. A new player sort of almost can't go wrong. I mean, you still probably can go wrong by, like, putting all your points in charisma as a fighter and having only the minimum strength that fighter gives you. That might not
That would be really bad.
Yeah, that might not be a good choice. But those are sort of, I would say, the number 1 and number 2 ways that 2nd edition influenced Starfinder. And you'll find a lot of little things in there as well.
Okay. So I missed Monday's blog post, and thanks to talking with Mark, I know that it was about the Barbarian, and I think we're going to chat a little bit about how the Barbarian has evolved from 1st edition to 2nd edition.
Sure.
So where's the best place to start with the Barbarian?
I think the best place to start with the Barbarian is to talk about that evolution, because it's not just 1st edition to 2nd edition. There's something in the middle there, right? Pathfinder Unchained.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So
yeah.
there's an Unchained Barbarian, and the Unchained Barbarian started along the path of, like, so the Pathfinder 1st edition Barbarian, once you get beyond its core chassis and start getting into the advanced player's guide with some of the options like totems that were in the advanced player's guide, and almost everybody takes a totem. They're just so cool in Pathfinder 1st edition. It really came into its own with the advanced player's guide. Like, it's a solid class. It does what it needs to do, even without being unchained. Like, it's powerful enough to contribute in combat. It's got some cool tricks. But the problem that it had was actually, and people sometimes ask, like, why did it get unchained? Like, it was fine, but it was actually very hard to adjudicate, especially for new players, because it would adjust your stats, and then it adjusted a whole bunch of other numbers on your sheet. That, like, your swim goes up by 2, and you know, depending on what temporary bonuses mean, which I know has fluctuated, your carrying capacity may go up, and, like, your hit points go up, but then they go back down and you die potentially, and it was hard to adjudicate. So the Pathfinder Unchained Barbarian, one of the main things that it did was simplify the bonuses that you got from Rage and make it so you don't, like, up your con and your max hit points and then they go back down and you die when the Rage ends, but instead it gave temporary hit points. And that is definitely a lesson learned and applied in the Pathfinder 2nd edition Barbarian, because it gives you Pathfinder 2nd edition Barbarian's Rage is a little different. It applied the lesson from Unchained, it applied some other stuff. So first of all, one of the main things that I played a Barbarian in Shattered Star up to, gosh, whatever level is at the end of Shattered Star, 16, 17. And past level like 4 or 5, I never ran out of rage rounds. I even took Raging Brutality, which lets me spend extra rage rounds to have my con modifier to damage, and Auspicious Mark to spend extra rage rounds to add extra bonuses to my die rolls. I never ran out of rage rounds. Have you played a 1st edition Barbarian?
Oh, I haven't played a Barbarian in ages,
but did you ever run out of rage rounds?
Yeah, I did, but I was a bad Barbarian player.
Oh. Maybe your group also played a lot of fights in the same day.
Yeah, we did. Back then we played a lot of Hack Slash. Yeah.
So my group, we would have a good number of fights, but even so, like, you just get so many rounds of rage, you might as well have as many as you want. So in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, you do have as many as you want. There's not a limit to how many rounds of rage that you have. Instead, the way that rage works is you enter a rage. When you do, you take a -1 to AC. You can't take actions with the concentrate trait. And now that we have a concentrate trait, we can just say that, and we don't have to like specify these base skills and these things, except for the ones that you might like. You remember it was like you can't do any intelligence, wisdom, or charisma based skills, except maybe some of them you can, because they might not be require too much concentration. But it just says don't take action with the concentrate trait, and you get a bunch of extra damage on top of your regular damage, and you get a really nice bonus of temporary hit points based on your constitution and your barbarian level that just come on it.
Okay.
This will last for 3 rounds. Afterwards, you're fatigued for 1 round. And fatigued is a really kind of a cool condition now. And before it was not that cool. It was just sort of like kind of hard to remember. It's -2 strength, -2 dex, which you then had to apply to all the different things that strength and dex applied to. And you can't run or charge. Now, the way that fatigue works is your movement speed is a little bit slower, but that's not the main course. The main course is you take a -1 penalty to what I'll describe as your defenses. It turns out to be your defenses. It's to a variety of things. Okay. For every action you take on your turn, you have 3 actions on a turn, increase that penalty by 1. So you might reach a point in your turn on around when you're fatigued when you're like, well, you know, I could take my 3rd action, but I don't want to increase my penalty on my defenses. And you're still, the actions are good. You don't lose anything on your offense. Like, they're powerful enough to take them, but you're tired. Because, you know, you might want to take a rest.
You're easier to hit.
Yeah, but you're tired and you might not want to take all your actions. So it sort of fits with the role play of being tired. You might choose not to take them all. It doesn't say you're slow and you lose the actions. You still have them. But do you really want to take all 3 of those and have a -4 when that means you can be crit more often too in Pathfinder 2nd Edition? I don't know if you want to do that.
Oh, I never thought about that application.
And we didn't say in the blog exactly what fatigue does, so that's a little spoiler for you guys. That should be on Friday's blog, but you
really
can hear it
cool.
early. So after that 1 round is up, you can enter another rage. Get more temporary hit points. It's a good number of temporary hit points. I've had a barbarian since the barbarian class was finalized. In pretty much every game of the playtest game I'm running, in the sort of the alpha and then beta playtest, and yeah, if the fight actually does go long enough for 5 rounds, which it doesn't always, she grabs up the extra temporary hit points from entering rage again, and those always help her stay afloat, because every time you enter it, you can get more temporary hit points. And so in a lot of games with a lot of characters, you sort of get this curve of what your character can do during a fight. And it usually works in one of a few ways. Like, you might have a curve of, like, if you know it's a big fight, I throw out my best thing and then I'm sort of, like, going down because I don't have more things that are as powerful, and sort of, like, come in hard like a rocket and then sort of waning down. Casters sort of have that in a big fight. You can sometimes also have like a weird inconsistent ramp up where it's like, I can't trip, whatever. Oh, this is much harder than I thought. And then you just suddenly spike up to using a more powerful option than before. Some characters are more constant or get whittled away a little bit by like losing hit points and stuff. The Barbarian has these things where you start off and you enter the rage, and that round's your setup round. But then there's these actions you can only take in rage. Sometimes that last for the rage and give you benefits. Like, what if I told you could grow wings, but it only lasts until the end of that rage? But it takes another one of your actions. So you might not want to do all of that in your first round, because you could take 1 attack at your highest bonus. But it might be worth, on your 2nd round, putting up the wings. And so you sort of, as a barbarian, you got to go up over the course of the first 3 rounds as you, like, I have wings now, and, or, like, spirits are blocking ranged attacks against me, and then you hit the top. Your peak is on round 3 of the rage when all of those things are active, and then they end, and you go back down to being fatigued for a round, then that ends, and you go back to raging. So you've got these cycles of curve, and you probably don't go through more than like 2 cycles, and even that is a 7-round fight, which is much longer than most fights. So The fun thing about it was I got to do a lot of sort of the early look at collecting what people thought about Barbarians in first edition and like tinkering around with Rage. And the fact that it's 3 rounds, like, it was interesting because I tried it with 2 rounds and 4 rounds, and 2 is way too short, especially for the things I was saying with, like, get those wings, like, oh, and then they're off.
Yeah, I can
and
see
4
that.
turned out it was way too long. Like, I was thinking, like, maybe they'll be a little better one way or another, but, like, 1 round was, like, 4 rounds meant that, like, Barbarians almost never got out of their Rage. Or if they did, everything was almost dead, and there was just a mop-up round on the 5th round. And 3 was just very interesting in a large variety of fights and gave Barbarians interesting things to do. They lasted for enough time. It was just like, maybe it shouldn't have surprised me because the Solarian also is on a 3-round cycle because of similar reasons, right? So that's sort of like how Rage works. But I was mentioning before that totems were a thing that was very popular, right?
Are a blast, actually. I've never actually played a Barbarian with a totem.
Okay. Because you played early on before those
I had
advanced
bad
player
experiences
guides
with
days.
Barbarians, and I've not played one since.
Oh man, what was it that you didn't like about first edition Barbarians? I'll tell you if we fixed it. We might not have.
Oh, I'm pretty sure you did, just from what you told me about Rage. My problem was I would always Rage, and it was low level. So
Right.
I would Rage, and then I would just end up like I'm really worthless because my Rage ended and I died.
Yeah. So that is the problem with the limited Rage rounds number, is that at higher levels you just have too many. But like, you either have there are 2 amounts of Rage you can have during a day, really, even though it's scaled by 2 per level or whatever. There's not enough and
Or too much.
too much. I mean, you could have exactly enough, which is actually similar to too much, because if you actually have exactly enough that all of your rounds during the fight during the day are raging, that is too much. It might have been
It doesn't
unlimited.
balance well, yeah.
Right. So, yeah, at first level, yeah, you only have 6 rounds of rage probably with 14 con. That's not nearly enough to actually rage for all of your fights. You eventually reach the point where it is, and then beyond that, you keep getting these rounds that you have to find other ways to use. So, yes, it seems like we got you covered on that.
I think so, yeah.
But the totems were one of the most interesting parts about them, or that a lot of people took. And so we have put totems as a core aspect of Barbarians. You pick one at first level. There is one called the Fury Totem that is basically not a totem that's not a totem. It's like you don't really have any superstitions or traditions, or basically what a totem is in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. It's not necessarily like a tribal animal or symbol. It can be. It often takes some sort of form like that in your head, but it is what brings you your rage. It could be because one of your ancestors was a dragon that you have this totem. It could be because of something psychologically deep within you, like trauma that you had, a magical curse that came upon you. It could be because you revere a tribal totem. Like, you can literally be a barbarian who's like a noble from the city who has these episodes of anger that you try to control and unleash when you need to, and you're lawful aligned. We don't have an alignment restriction on them anymore.
Oh, okay, cool. That's good.
So, yeah. And the Fury Totem is basically like, yeah, you don't have any of these things. It's just sort of rage. There's not anything deeper to that. And then you just get an extra feat instead of a starting rage power, and you don't get more later rage powers. And every barbarian gets some kind of damage they're resistant to based on their con modifier, and it's usually tied to their totem. So like, if you're dragon totem, then it's like you're resistant to like your dragon's breath weapon type, and also physical damage that's associated with like one of the dragon's natural unarmed strike type attacks. I can't remember which one off the top of my head, but the Fury is just like, yeah, manufactured weapons. It doesn't matter if it's slashing, bludgeoning, or piercing. You're gonna run into those. It's pretty generic manufactured weapons. So there's that one. But I didn't talk about all of them on the blog, so we're going to talk about a few more of them this time. So on the blog I mentioned Animal Totem, where you can like grow claws or like fangs or whatever unarmed attack your animal uses, and eventually turn into the animal. Like a true berserker who turns into a bear. You can do that with Animal Totem. And every totem also has an anathema, except for Fury Totem, where that's something that just is sort of taboo to your totem. So, for example, Giant Totem, Amiri's Totem, the totem that lets you wield a enormous sword and grow to a bigger size potentially, also says that you have to accept like a fair test of your strength. You don't back down from that kind of thing. And Amiri, I mean, she didn't back down in her story to an unfair test of her strength where they're like, go kill Frost Giant, because they just wanted to get rid of her tribe. Then she went back and killed all of them.
Yeah, nothing unfair about that.
But with the giant sword, which she can now wield because she's a giant totem. So we say, hey, yeah, use oversized weapons. We have that in the core now. That's in one of the totems. There's Dragon Totem, which grows those wings I told you about before. It also has a Dragon Breath AoE that does very high AoE damage. It takes quite a while for you to recover your respiratory system after that point, to the point where you can do it again.
So are you punished more than like regular rage with that? Or
no,
okay.
You're fine, other than that you just can't breathe again. Just like dragons have to wait a few rounds to breathe again. You have to wait far longer than that to breathe again because you are not fully a dragon. You can do it as many times per day as you have enough breaks. You can even be adventuring during those breaks. You don't have to actually stop doing things, but it takes a while to get ready for another one of those dragon breaths. And that's Dragon Totem. We talked about Fury Totem. Online, we also talked about the Superstitious Totem, which is the one that has the hardest anathema. Most of the Barbarian anathemas are like that Amiri thing that's like, this is a fun roleplay thing. It might come up occasionally. If you break it, you lose the things from your totem, but keep all your other Barbarian powers until you spend a day of reflection. It's really easy to get it back. You don't need an atonement spell. Superstitious Totem is much harder to keep your anathema because you can't willingly accept spells from your allies. No heal, no haste, no fly, but you get really, really good benefits. Like, and when you see it, it might not seem like a major number to you, but for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, a big bonus on save against spells. It's 2, but it's very big in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. No, 2 is enormous because every time you get a bonus on your save, that is both helping you succeed. In Pathfinder 1st Edition, right, let's say there was a DC 17 save, you had a +8. So you made it on a 9. If I give you a +2, that only matters if you roll the numbers 8 or 7 on your die, right? Because if you didn't, you would have made it anyway, or you fail anyway, right?
Right.
So there's only a 1 in 10 chance that bonus helped you. In 2nd Edition, though, if you make it on a 9, that means you critically succeed the save on a 19. That means my +2 is going to help you on a roll of 8, 7, those turn into successes, 18, 17 turn into critical success, and you want that, because we made a lot of the saving throw spells do something bad to you, but not too bad if you succeed, and then nothing on a critical success.
Okay.
So it's actually twice as powerful. It's like having +4 to all saves in Pathfinder 1st Edition. It's at least that good.
+4 is pretty broken.
And then you get Spell Sunder, where you can just be like, smash! Wall of Forces down. Like, I think one of the few things that I saw, like Logan raising his eyebrows when he was running us through the playtest adventure, Doomsday Dawn, was Ron came in with a Superstitious Dwarf Barbarian, and he was just spell sundering a bunch of stuff. And Logan's like, what is this ability? And then Ron is like, I can't accept any spells from the other players. I'm like, oh, okay, I see where this is coming in. So
willingly.
Yeah.
So if
not
he's
willingly.
unconscious, he could be healed.
He can, but he can use magic items. That's fine. It's not a spell. He can use alchemy. That's not even magic in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. If you have to really not be willing. You also can't just have someone who's like, oh, I cast haste. Sorry, ha 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 ha. If your allies keep disrespecting you and casting spells on you when you told them that you can't accept it, you do have to eventually stop adventuring with those jackals because...
Those jackals.
Yes, because they're clearly not respecting your superstition. I mean, that may help you if you're in a game of organized play where you're always playing with a different group, because like, well, I'll never adventure with them again, and you never will, because you'll never see that person again. But you're supposed to not willingly accept it if you're in superstition. So here's one that we didn't talk about in the blog, I think, Spirit Totem. That's one of the other ones from the Advanced Player's Guide originally. And Spirit Totem has all these spirits around. It gives you what turns out to be this, like, anytime you're in a rage, this ranged attack, even if your hands are full of just like a spirit going and attacking things. And eventually you can get feats where spirits are all around you. So once you activate it, there's a mischance on ranged attacks against you, which is similar to what they did in first edition. And their anathema involves like violating and disrespecting dead bodies, which most people don't do that normally. So just
True.
don't do that.
Do that.
Don't pee in the sarcophagus. If you're from the spirit tunnel, because a lot of them are not that much of an anathema, but except superstitious. So we talked about dragon, animal, superstitious, fury, which is not a totem, giant.
Giant.
Okay, and
well, you already said spirit. So
oh yeah, I already said spirit. So
I think that's all 6.
I think that's all of them. So, or that's all of the ones I'm going to talk about today, because I may have forgotten one of the totems.
And if you didn't catch it, there are feats that can affect, I'm going to guess, both the rage and the totems, because
You're absolutely right.
he just said that.
Every totem, except Fury Totem, which is the one that doesn't have a further path, has further path. If you go deep into the giant totem's path, you can turn size huge. That's the thing you can do. You can just be a huge barbarian that is wandering around the battlefield, lumbering around. You do, when you're huge and becoming that big, you do take some penalties on attack, well, -1 on attack rolls, AC, and reflex save, but your reach, pardon my reach, it's very, very far.
All right. So I don't think this has been covered in any of the blog posts, and if it has been, I missed it. Sorry.
Okay.
Starfinder has stamina, resolve.
Mm-hmm.
Is there going to be anything like that in Pathfinder 2nd Edition?
No. Starfinder stamina, Starfinder stamina is something that was very sort of a specialized subsystem that helps Starfinder tell some stories that are more like the science fantasy stories that are often told, where the heroes are like in a shootout and then they go and they sort of hide in an alcove for a little while, have another scene where they talk to each other about how desperate the situation is, and then they go back in right after that. And for those like little short rests, take a break, take a breather type situation, stamina is perfect for that. You'd have to stretch to say it's similar to Resolve, but you could claim that like the spell points, in that it is a unified point system that helps you cast your spells, is maybe 5 to 10% similar to Resolve, and that we're not going to have like arcane pool points and number of uses of wizard powers, of wizard school powers, and number of uses of domain powers, and number of uses of those kind of things will just generally give you a pool of spell points that you use to cast these special spells from your class. And some classes might have a separate pool of some other second thing that is not their spell points, like we saw also Cleric's Channels are a bunch of extra heals or harms at your top level that you can cast each day. But that's sort of like the idea of maybe we should unify this instead of having a character with 7 different pools is, I would say maybe it's just an earlier idea that led to Resolve in one hand and the spell point pool in the other hand. But it's not going to be something like Resolve where that's like also refreshing your stamina and being used as a meta currency for death and dying or things like that.
Okay. That was because I was curious about that.
Yeah. We never said that one way or the other.
Good. I'm glad that I didn't miss it because I sometimes miss what I read.
Or misread.
I do that too. Especially with British rule books.
There's a lot of extra U's in there. And
a lot of extra stuff in general.
then there's maneuver has a really cool spelling though, because it's got like the O and the R before the E.
He's right. It does. I don't know how many rule books you guys read, but it's an interesting topic when you sometimes like English is the universal language, right? But you can read an English book that was designed for Australians and then one that was designed for the UK, and you'll see that they're written differently. It's kind of cool. That's just a different study. Anyway, that's off topic.
Yeah.
What else do you want to talk about?
Well, let's see. I think I talked about totems and range for barbarians, and I mentioned all of the built-in class talents of Barbarian in the blog already, so there's no need to go through all of them, but some of the cool stuff they get does include getting up to Legendary and Fortitude saves, at which point they get like this improved Juggernaut ability where all your successes on fortitude saves become critical successes, so you just shake it off entirely, and your critical failures become failures, which means you can never suffer the worst fortitude save result, which is very powerful.
Oh wow!
That means like if it's a most save or die spells, probably are only going to actually kill you dead on a critical failure. So the Barbarian is not going to have that ever happen. Now you still might die from damage, like if the failure does a lot of damage that can possibly kill you.
That almost sounds super tanky.
It's very, between that, the extra temporary hit points, and starting with 12 per level instead of 10 per level like the fighter, you are tanky in the way Barbarians always are. Your AC is not the greatest. You in fact are inflicting a -1 on yourself when you enter Rage, which it may seem like less than the -2 from Pathfinder 1st edition, but you remember what I said about the +1s and the -1s. You're basically giving all your enemies improved critical on you because they can now crit you more often too. In some ways. You might not be if your AC is otherwise very high and they needed more than, like they didn't have any crits up there in the upper end, but that's not always the easiest to do. Still, you can be pretty darn tanky as a Barbarian. You can be the one sitting there, and other people in the party looking at their own hit points are like, why is this person still
alive?
Now, that's one kind of tanky. Some kind of tank is like, oh, you didn't get hit. Like, there were 7 attacks. Oh, I never got hit. I blocked it with my shield. No damage. The Barbarian is not that. You're the one, you can build to have a pretty good AC, but you're the one, you go up, you get surrounded, everyone attacks you. Some of the attacks miss because of your AC, even with the -1, but then it's like, the GM's like, yeah, and then you took 120 damage. And then the wizard is like, we're level 10. I've put up my con and took toughness, and I have like less than 100 hit points. And then the Barbarian's like, yeah, whatever. Do you know how many I have left at this point? The Barbarian's like, I had 180, not counting my temporary hit points. So I took some of that to the temporary hit points. So I'm actually still have more than half as many hit points as you do at full at this point, wizard. Or something like that. I didn't calculate it out exactly, but I think that is at least nearly right.
Oh my god. Wow. They're pretty broken. Or seemingly broken.
Well, I would say that the best way to balance things is that if everyone feels like they are super awesome when they're playing their characters, oh my god, I must be really broken. Yeah. But then the math of the game thinks, no, they're doing what we want them to be doing. They're doing what we expected them to be doing. Whereas some things in Pathfinder 1st edition had an issue where they didn't feel like they were very good, but they were actually very powerful. That's the worst situation, because then people want it to be buffed and it's actually very strong. Like, a great example of a strategy that is extremely powerful in Pathfinder 1st edition, even if you don't have extra class abilities to go into it, but feels so bad and doesn't make you feel like a hero, is counterspelling in Pathfinder 1st edition. I played an Oracle. I didn't have anything for counterspelling. I didn't have anything to raise my dispel checks. I just had Dispel Magic as one of my spells now. That is by the extent of my investment. And I bought other things like Karma Prayer Beads to get my caster level up, because why would I not do that? That makes my buff stronger. I was mostly going to buff and summon things. But we played the infamous Waking Rune Pathfinder Society scenario where you fight a Rune Lord. I just countered everything that he did. I didn't have anything for it, but it's boring. You ready in action, you don't get to do your turn. And then you say, oh, that turn didn't happen. So you don't really do anything, you just make things not happen. But people often say counterspelling is weak in Pathfinder 1st edition. It's not weak, it's just very boring and unheroic and doesn't feel very good for the person doing it. So the best things are the ones that are actually balanced, but feel like, oh my god, I must be broken. This is so cool.
Yeah, they make you feel like you're a hero.
Yeah, we try to do that as much as we can, is make people have fun, feel like they're doing something really cool, and do something really cool, but have the game expect they can do those cool things. And so therefore, sort of, the game works around that. It works around heroism. It encourages heroism.
And that's the way it should be.
Definitely.
I mean, I'm not... Wow, we can really go off topic here and talk about TPK, which I'm not a fan of.
Yeah, total party kills can be very demoralizing.
Well, it's
sometimes they happen if you've been pushing the PCs. And
Yeah, it can, but I'm not a fan of them happening as a GM. And I think that people play the game to be heroes. You should find ways to make them heroic.
I think that's true. And also, it's one of the important things about Pathfinder is it's a flexible system, so the GM can figure out what makes their group feel like heroes. And this is not an easy question to answer, and this is not in Pathfinder
different.
2nd Edition design, but it's different. I know that my group, they feel like heroes if the GM has created a challenging encounter for them and they overcome it based on their strategy, tactics, their things that their characters have been doing by playing smart, and they felt like, oh yeah, those enemies were pretty intelligent and were pretty strong enemies, but we took that. Whether we crush the strong enemies because the tactics are really good, or whether it's tough but we scrape it out because we were playing smart, that's what makes my home group. It's like just my friends that I've been playing with since college. That's what the group likes. Some groups actually don't like that. They feel more heroic if all of the fights are a walkover, that just sort of they go into it and smash and everything goes down like bowling pins, because that makes them feel like a superhero, like Superman going up against like the random robbers with guns. And my group would just feel like that doesn't make them a hero. They're just sort of a bully at that point. But
I can see that.
But many groups like, no, that's the heroic fantasy. I am awesome and nothing can stand against me, not even a little. And obviously there's things in between that, those two, maybe those are not even extremes, but it's hard to make a game for it without a GM, and that's why we always rely on the game master to know your group, know your game, and run it in a way that works for that group.
Okay. So is that everything for the Barbarian?
Let me think. Well, let me see. I'll mention here, which I've already mentioned on the blog, that my favorite class feature for the Barbarian is Mighty Rage at 11th level, which lets you do one of those special rage actions like growing wings or putting spirits up around you automatically when you enter rage, or growing to size huge. So it's like, yeah, I entered rage. I also grew to size huge, or turned into a dragon. Oh, I didn't say you could turn into a dragon before. You can turn into a dragon. If you're dragon totem, obviously. Oh no, actually spirit totem turns into a dragon. No, it's dragon totem that turns into a dragon. Let me think. Well, some people asked whether or not some of the feats like Sudden Charge and Whirlwind Strike that seemed like they were previewed for Fighter were only for Barbarians. They are for both classes. They are both a Fighter feat and a Barbarian feat. And there are some feats that are like that are available for multiple classes. They're listed in each class's entry in their class feats, and either class can take those feats.
Okay, that's good. I think that should wrap it up then.
Sounds good.
All right.
I think so.
Ben, thanks. That was
you're
that was
welcome.
fun. It's always neat to talk to new people. If I had my way, I'd go to PaizoCon and interview them all, but that's a few years away, I think. Later, guys. Oh wait, shameless self-promotion. Somewhere here, there's going to be a link to my Kickstarter that starts on Tuesday for my Gen Con Blitz. Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Like, share, and subscribe.